Good morning. Today I'm at the Lyonia Preserve in Deltona, Florida. We're going to look at an example of high scrub habitat, sand pine scrub. And most of the plants here are adapted to dry seasonal rain. Dry most of the year. It's a very well drained soil, but it does rain here quite frequently. Most of the vegetation is adapted to a fire regime of 10 to 15 years, so it's not necessarily a, let's see what we can find. It is a fire adapted community that requires fire for certain or plants and animals that live here require fire to regenerate. So I think it's a little bit of a longer interval as compared to pine flatwoods, longer intervals in between burning. But burning helps clear out most of the oaks, which will eventually regenerate. Most of these oaks have a very substantial root system, and they invest heavily into the root structure so that when the top of the tree is completely burned away, most of this vegetation can resprout from a fire with no problem whatsoever. And right now there's some interesting plants here in flower that are endemic. We only found in this area and only found in the scrub in Florida. One of them's in flower now. I saw it a couple of weeks ago when I was here. It's Garberia. It's a monophyletic genus, I believe. It's only one species. I think it's Garberia heterophylla, and it's in flowering now. Here to look at, yep, here's some right here. This is a short example of it. And we are in the middle of November, and it's going off. And I think we'll see a lot of it here. The background, you can see vaccinium. I think these are shiny blueberries. And this is a common understory feature here in the scrub. This vine cover that's growing here, it's gopher apple. It's a very tough member of this ecosystem. And it's a sprawling vine that you find all over the ground here on the edges. Most of the flowers and interesting herbaceous stuff you're going to find on the edges. This oak is pretty thick. This is a sand live oak, Quercus geminata. You can see how the leaves are so curled. This is to minimum, and they're also very thin as compared to other oaks. And this is an adaptation to this dry, xerophytic environment. Another tree that seems pretty common here, it's a bay. I believe this is Persea bourbonia, red bay. And you find this in the swamps, but you also find it in scrub habitats. And it's a really nice tree. I believe the leaves are used as a flavoring in like tomato sauces, a dried leaf or two. They're very fragrant. This is myrtle oak, Quercus myrtifolia. And it also has these curled leaves to minimize water loss and a waxy surface. And so on this Quercus geminata, you can see this gall moth that makes some kind of cocoon on here. It's a gall, actually, which is tissue created by the oak tree to sequester the insect that's burrowing into its surface. And these can be quite diagnostic on different oak species because they only occur on certain oak species. So. Quercus myrtifolia right here. It's got the more oblong, ovate leaves pretty consistently. And the Quercus geminata, or sand live oak, has these narrow, downturned, very waxy, thick leaves. So, very thick cuticle. So here you can see some Garberia flowering here. Usually it gets a lot taller. This here is it's a Lyonia. That's what the preserve is named after. And you can tell by these woody, reddish brown trunks of these trees. Grass here is an andropogon species. This is probably the blue stem, chalky blue stem. There's a couple species in the area, but I'm not exactly sure which one that is. It's a nice Garberia here. Over here we have one of the scrub endemics native to this area. This is a really interesting plant. It's called rosemary, but it's not the rosemary that you would superficially resembles it, but it's not the herbaceous one that you would put in your food on your steak. And this is a fire maintained species that requires clearing, and it's a very primitive plant associated with scrub lizards, which I wish I could see here, but it's rather cool. But here you can see the Garberia, which I believe is in the aster family. That's a rosemary here. It's a beautiful plant. It has a very interesting smell. Some people hate it, some people like it, but one thing I can tell you, it's unique. You won't smell it anywhere else. It kind of smells like a little bit like rotten sage. Here's the Lyonia. They call it rusty Lyonia because of the rusty colored stems. And I've seen this commonly gets a type of gall, fleshy looking gall on it from insect activity on it. So we're at probably about 80 feet above sea level here. This is actually one of the higher spots in Florida. There is a very high point here, which is probably like 90 feet above sea level. And you can see how this is almost like a mountain in Florida. This vegetation, very restricted to this type of habitat at this elevation. Here we've got a plant that's like equally adapted to a dry environment or a wet environment. This is a saltbush, Baccharis halmifolia, and it grows into a thick shrub in ideal conditions. But this plant is very common throughout Central Florida in disturbed areas, rural areas, and as you can see, it offers quite a lot of wildlife potential with all these flowers all over. And it's very hardy. The seeds are wind dispersed and they spread everywhere, and that plant is a survivor. Here you can see growing in here some dog fennel that has flowered. It has that uniquely pickle-like scent, dill-like. Some of the other oaks that we get in here are Chapman's oak, which is a small shrubby oak. Darlington oak. So growing on the ground here, you can see lichen, and I believe this is deer lichen or deer moss. You can see it growing back there. It takes decades for that to grow, and it absorbs moisture off the sand and nutrients off the very top of the sand. It tends to, these areas, these scrub areas, tend to collect a lot of dew, and so in the morning plants are adapted to sort of sucking up whatever moisture they can get. And you've got a lot of this deer moss trying to take hold in here. And when it's dry, like it is now, it'll kind of die back, but when it gets wet, it puffs up again. So I got some leaves, oak leaves here, so you can tell the difference between them. This is myrtle oak. You see the leaf is this oval shape. This is sand live oak, Quercus geminata, and it has the elongated shape. I guess I would describe that as elliptical, elongated. And then we have the Chapman's oak, which has these toothed margin here. 3 tooths usually, and this one, if you flip it, it's kind of wavy, and the underside is gray. Now, a look-alike that you might see here is the bay tree. It has a very similar looking leaf, but you can see how smoother it is, and if you turn it over, you can see the bay is brown underneath, and the oak is light green or whitish. And then the Quercus geminata as well, it has this green. So I'm sorry, this is myrtle oak. So Quercus myrtifolia, Quercus geminata, and Quercus chapmani. So these are just 3 of the oaks, but these are 3 of the most common ones here. So we'll keep looking. So we're walking on a sort of a side trail from the main trail, and you can see there's a lot less herbaceous vegetation in this thicket. We're not going to probably see very much. What we normally see here is a gopher apple on the edge, and then a variety of the Chapman's oak, sand live oak, and myrtle oak, along with the Lyonia, and a red bay thrown in here and there. So one of the really common plants here is the different members of the Ericaceae or blueberry family. And I believe that these blueberries provide a lot of seasonal food for various animals, including scrub jays, which live here and are endemic to this region. They only occur here. This is scrub jay habitat and towhee habitat as well. I've seen a lot of towhees here. Now here on the Lyonia, we can see these fleshy galls that are, I think some of these are formed by bacteria, some of them are formed by, or fungus, some are formed by wasps. I'm not sure which one, but this is not a fruit, this is a gall on the Lyonia. And another one here called gallberry has similar fleshy galls on it. And maybe we'll see that. That's a very common understory species. You can see in the distance here we have some pine trees. These are sand pines, short-lived pine trees that fire adapted, require fire. The seeds, cones will open up after fire and broadcast their seeds all over the place. Any seeds that are dormant or cones that are lying in the brush will open up after a fire or when it's dry and spread the seeds around. But sand pines are a vanishing species here in Florida. They're not being widely planted to replace. And most of the time they're replacing them with slash pine. So we're losing a lot of them, and they're short-lived, so I think the lifespan on them can't be more than 100 years. We have a couple different types of palm trees growing here, but 2 low-growing palm trees. One of them is rather rare. here in Florida in general. Sable Lyonia, and then there's Serenoa repens. This one I believe is saw palmetto, and you can tell it's got the very sharp serrated petioles on these leaves. Sable Lyonia looks like a cabbage palm that never grows out of the ground, and maybe we'll see that around here. You can hear the gray catbirds calling. So here we can see on this bay tree here, its fruit, and I think it's these purple and black fruits. You don't want to eat them though, they kind of just taste like spice. There's some crows going crazy over there. But here we have what's Smilax, also known as cat briar vine. This one I believe is Smilax auriculata. And these are the fruits. Smilax is a very common vine understory species throughout Florida. Obviously cat claw vine, because many of the species get like really sharp spurs in the axils on the vine. This one does not have spines, so this one's like easy to handle. But all of them have some kind of use for wildlife, although they're not showy in terms of flowers, and the fact that they have thorny spikes makes them not really good for the garden. But interesting nonetheless, the variety of leaves that they have. It's interesting to note across the different Florida habitats. So the birds that you're hearing are eastern towhees, and they live in the brush here. I think they might be seasonal, but they live in the shrubby overgrowth and call to each other. Occasionally you'll see them popping their heads up on the tops of the vegetation, but for the most part they hide in amongst the thickets of the vegetation. And where the scrub jay prefers a more open habitat, so that they can hunt, find acorns along the edge and the margins of this thicket, the towhee spends a little more time in the depths of the thicket. So I tend to see more towhees here than scrub jays. But you can also hear some American crows. I think there's a pond over here that they might be gathering at. Sounds like they're getting ready to flock, look for food. Vegetation. Over here we have a native prickly pear, which doesn't look that healthy actually, but I believe this is Opuntia humifusa, but I'm not sure. It looks like it might be affected by too much water, but this is not the healthiest looking specimen, but these are prickly mofos. Don't want to handle these. But their fruits are probably an important source of food for the gopher tortoises. So they should be replanted. And I'm sure the fruits are eaten by many other animals. Lots of rosemary coming up here. New, fresh rosemary, probably because they mowed this recently. And it allows all the rosemary to resprout. This is great. This is definitely what you'd want to see. I mean, kind of sucks to say it, but the shit needs to get cleared. And often they mechanically clear it because they can't burn it anymore due to its proximity to residential areas. So it's not burned, but they do mechanically come here with a roller and roller chop. And, it's not ideal, but it does sort of help maintain some of the communities and some of the plants. Back here you can see some shiny sumac. One of our sumac species. Rus, meaning red. If you come back here, I noticed this. Looks like a gopher tortoise burrow. right next to the rosemary here. And yeah, to go for tortoise burrow. A lot of animals rely on that burrow. This is what you would call a keystone species, which means that some of the habitat that it creates for itself is occupied by a variety of other species, and that's gopher tortoise creating that burrow creates a habitat for indigo snakes, gopher mice, gopher mouse, other pine snakes, other endangered species, threatened species. We've got a nice ponte over here. Nicer. You can see it's got some fruit on it right there. It's not red. When it turns red, it's ripe. Yeah. When the Garberia is going off, I think we're a week late, but when the Garberia is going off, I mean, it's pretty spectacular. And just the habitat, I mean, it's unique. You can hear some sandhill cranes. There's a marshy area back here. But you can hear all the wildlife. And this doesn't look like it would support very much, but yet there is so much life here. A really important part of this sand scrub ecosystem are these ants. And these ants are probably cold, so they're not actively out foraging, but these ants are harvester ants, and one of the things that they do is bring back little bits of seeds and actually help promote the propagation of various plants by spreading their seeds. After they utilize some of the seed components, they'll bring what they can eat out and create a little dumping zone around the anthill, and a lot of the seeds will germinate. And some of the species kind of require or are greatly helped by these ants helping to disperse their seeds. Also on here, I'm looking at this moss, and I'm noticing, you can see these are the I guess you would say propagation structures of this moss, these red tips. So if you're here in the scrub, it's not going to take long for scrub jays to find you if you don't find them. And I think that's a scrub jay. Now, commonly scrub jays have sentinel birds that will kind of look out for the rest of them, and they will alert to danger. I don't know if you can see him there. I'm still looking for some sable Lyonia. I have not found any yet. Let's keep looking. And here's a cool little flower here native to the scrub habitat, and I'm hoping to see a little bit more of this because I saw it last time. This is coastal plain honeycomb head, and this is an annual that regrows from seed every year. And this is almost limited to Florida. It just barely makes its way into Georgia and the surrounding border of Florida. And when the ray flowers fall off, it leaves the central disc flowers, and so you see like a little ball. And so you'll see these like daisy-like flowers, and then little yellow balls. Hopefully we'll see more. I would like to collect seed of this. It's kind of hard to grow, I'm sure. I got a little more here. Let's see, it gets like this ball and persists after the ray flowers fall off, and you can see these tricuspid ray flowers. And if you don't know, the ray flowers are the rays of the sun-like flower. The disc flowers are the flowers that occur in the central disc. So, most of these seeds are going to be wind dispersed. Here you can see how interesting it looks when you have a variety of flowers maturing at different times. It turns from yellow. At first it gets a daisy look, and then red and yellow. It's really cool. Over here you can see some whenever I'm in the scrub, I notice this. I'm often perplexed by what the hell it could be, but this pile of sand with a hole in it, oftentimes you'll see these, but obviously you'll see no critter in it. I believe these are cicada killer wasps, very big wasps that kill cicadas, obviously, and that is their mound when they emerge. I've seen these in parking lots, not parking lots, but around landscaping, around plazas and stuff, and then that's where I noticed the wasps coming in and out. Never seen them in the scrub coming out, but you will see burrows though in the scrub. There's a variety of burrowing animals, and a lot of life occurs under the sand. We have different types of skinks here, and snakes that also burrow, and also mammals as well. And in South Florida even, there's burrowing owls. I don't believe they occur up here. They also burrow into the sand, pine type habitats. And there's a variety of ecotones in the sand pine. There's scrubby sand pine, there's mixed pine. Oftentimes you'll see sand pine and slash pine in the same area. When the climate is a little more moist, it'll favor the slash pine, and when it's a little drier and more xeric and fire maintained, it will help the sand pines. There's some nice sand pines growing up here, and you can tell them apart. They're a little more wispy looking than your slash pines. Very often they lean in the direction of the prevailing winds, especially after a storm. You'll see them all leaning. Lyonia, rusty Lyonia. You can see why they call it rusty. And this is another, as all the species are here, very adapted to a dry, xeric environment. Now, there is rain here, but it's quickly depleted from the soil because of the elevations. And you can see this plant is adapted to this dry environment by having these down curled leaves, which is a common adaptation to xeric environments along all plants. And it also has a waxy surface to the leaf. And these are all ways to minimize water loss. Lyonia. This isn't in flower, but when it is, this is a rather impressive plant. This is a lupine, possibly sky blue lupine. I think the summer for that is, the summer is the season for that. We're heading into winter, but that's a really interesting plant here when it's in flower. Here's another one of the interesting oak species here at Lyonia Preserve. We have, this is the smallest, probably one of the smallest, or the smallest oak species. This is Quercus minima, the dwarf live oak. And it's just a real small, shrubby little thing. I think we can see it coming up over here. And I think this, like a lot of the oaks up here, it invests a lot into the root structure. And so I'm sure if this thing completely burned to the ground, it would resprout. but very waxy, thickened leaves, downturned, thick stems, all help reduce water loss and conserve moisture in the stems. And yeah, oaks are a variety of adaptations here in Florida to occupy all the different habitats. We're up at the top of the mountain now, and here you can see some coastal plain honeycomb head that's nicely in flower here. And growing on this sand. Well, apparently these dark looking plants are the honeycomb head, either probably before they flower. Kind of spatulate leaves, almost spoon-shaped. Such an interesting plant. It is growing in some dry soil, man. I mean, there's not much moisture in here at all. I mean, you can tell, look, it must have a root that goes deep. All right, so here we can see a little bit of the activity that harvester ants do, and you can see this is the debris pile that they create when they excavate and remove uneaten husks and seeds. They're basically farming fungus in there, and they're using the different parts of the seeds to create the fungus that they eat. Any part that is not converted into fungus, they take out. And this little litter pile can contain seeds, small seeds, sometimes so small obviously you can't see them with the naked eye. But this is what makes them so useful for germinating seeds in this habitat. Here's an interesting grass. This is Andropogon hirsutum. And hirsutum refers to the hairy nature of the grass blades. And you can see this with all the dew that's on there right now. You can see the hairiness of it. And this is one of several species of Andropogon here. I have not seen this before. It's ready to produce inflorescence. And these, I'm sure, are wind dispersed. But interesting Andropogon for the graminoid fans out there. Narrowleaf silkgrass, Pityopsis graminifolia. Graminifolia referring to the grass-like leaves. And before it flowers, it just looks like grass. And this plant also has a number of adaptations to this dry environment. The narrow leaves, hirsute leaves, also conserve moisture, reflect sunlight. The plant invests a lot into a root structure. It is a perennial, and the roots go down deep, find moisture, and come back year after year. Seeds are wind dispersed. This is a fall, winter flowering plant here, and I've grown this, and it's quite an adaptable little plant. So looking like what we have, I always like goldenrods. I try to grow a lot of different species of goldenrods, but I've only grown 2. This is one that I don't have experience with. This is Chapman's goldenrod. I guess this is a scrub goldenrod. I have not seen it before. And it's a little bit mid-flowering. We have a lot of it here that's in fruit along the edge here. And this also has the typical scrub vegetation adaptations, the narrow leaf, the hirsute stems, the waxy leaves. Oh, and over here, another member of the goldenrod tribe. tribe, I guess you could say. This is one I've been trying to grow, not very successfully. This is slender golden top, Euthymia. And this is one that really needs a lot of light. One of the adaptations to high light environments that you'll notice on leaves are these very reduced leaves that almost look like hairy, I guess, just they're thin leaves. And that requires, that usually means this plant is growing in a high light environment and requires high light. And I think I've been unsuccessfully somewhat growing it, not very successfully, due to the fact that it likes this high light, open environment. And it produces masses of small golden flowers like most goldenrods. And there's a pollinator's dream. But yeah, slender golden top. A lot of this beard lichen, what they call it. It's so dewy here in the morning. I can allow this to grow. And here we can see some goldenrod that's flowered. It's past its prime. Alright, well, we're going back up the mountain and see what we can see. Nice stand of rosemary, panoramic shot. All right, so here you can see our native Opuntia species, and looking a little ragged, right? We've got these white cottony things coming out of it. This is insect damage from, I believe, the cochineal insect that eats the inside of the cactuses out. It kind of limits their... This one's still doing good. Despite this insect parasite, it does seem to subsist. But just part of the ecology of the cactus here. Here we're in a little marsh, a little pond near Lyonia Preserve, and you can see the slash pines growing right there where it's a little wetter. And right here. Underneath the shade of this, well, not much shade of this sand live oak, Quercus geminata. It mainly forms these small, scrubby looking trees. Thicket of saw palmetto in here. I'm looking for the Lyonia, which hopefully we'll see it here. There's also a sable minor, which I'm not sure if that's here, but it's a dwarf saw palmetto, basically. But these are just regular saw palmettos. There's actually two forms of saw palmettos that you'll find in Florida. There's the green version and what they call the blue or silver version. And I think that you tend to find the blue version more in scrub habitats. I don't say it's a version, I think it's a variety, I guess you could say. But this is more of the green saw palmetto here. Here's a big weed that you find. Phytolacca americana, pokeweed. Rumored to be poisonous, but others would argue medicinal, nutritious, and life-sustaining. But you'll find this in disturbed areas and edges in both wet and dry habitats. You see the shiny berries. Don't eat too many of them, that might make you crap your pants. Phytolacca americana, American pokeweed. These reddish stems. Whoa, fuck. I just fell in a hole here. Looks like a partially dug armadillo hole. Alright, so we did find some Lyonia here. I just decided to sit down here at this little bench, and lo and behold, here's the Lyonia. And some of the distinguishing characteristics about Lyonia are, one, the fact that it does not have serrated petioles on the leaves. Second factor is that it rarely grows a trunk above ground. Third factor that you can use to identify is this habitat supports no cabbage palms whatsoever. Cabbage palm is found throughout Florida, but it is probably too dry here for that particular species. This species also has a different seed, and if you look at the seeds from this, the berries are much larger than a cabbage palm. So this one has recently obviously flowered and it's got nice fruit here. And it's just a nice little, this would be a great landscaping palm if it was more widely in use. I don't know how susceptible to rot it is from being in too much of a moist condition, but you almost only find it growing in scrub habitats. So interesting. I might collect some seeds. There's a number of flies on the fruits. They must be ripening and starting to ferment a little bit, because you can smell. There's a peculiar cabbage palm slash saw palm. If you've ever smelled saw palmetto berries, they smell like a combination of like berries and tobacco. It's weird. But let's see if I can grab a few of these seeds and try to grow the Lyonia. I was filming this goldenrod here, and then I heard the wings of a bird. Scrub jay, he's checking me out. He's making sure I'm legit. He's a little warning. He's a little guard. This is scrub jay habitat. This is their loved habitat. The like open area where they get good visual readout of the surrounding area here. There's quite a lot cleared here. But this is one instance of a habitat that's more productive for this bird when it's cleared and allowed to regrow back. So that's part of their management strategy here. Here's some more video of the Lyonia. And you can see how it just seems to emerge from the ground like a cabbage palm that never grows a trunk. And you can see how closely it keeps its seeds, roots to the base. And the lack of serration on the leaves.